Hello. It is Friday. Thank the gods, it's Friday. It is Friday, October 21st, 2022. And on this date in history, a leaf blew from an elm tree at the corner of Greenbrier Road and Carson Avenue and fell into the gutter, which was flowing with a small stream that was a runoff from a neighbor who was watering their yard. The leaf turned upside down like a small boat and bobbed its way through the gutter, approximately 1/4 of a block, basically 5 driveways away. It went unnoticed. So much for this day. This day in history. I'm going to talk a little bit today, continue talking. I had other ideas for today, and probably I should have gone with them. But I was taking my morning walk to Temple. Well, while it's here, I better take a slug of that. It's Friday after all. I started to think about last couple of days. I talked about my experiences in AMORC, A-M-O-R-C, Rosicrucian Order, and it stimulated or provoked a couple of more private messages here on Facebook Messengers, and I've been, telling them what I know, what my experience was. And then suddenly it just, the obvious universal truth sort of dawned on me as it echoed in my mind as I was taking my steps toward the coffee shop. That obviously all initiation is self-initiation. Even when you've got all sorts of fancy temple arrangements and initiatory officers and beautiful ceremonies and everything else, it's all designed to help you initiate yourself, all of it. Now I know that there's this idea that adepts can guide students, and adepts can help raise the consciousness of those around them, and there, to a certain extent, that may be true. Like the Indians have this idea of darshan, where an enlightened guru can just look at you and, in a sense, initiate you. Well, you can't be initiated unless you initiate yourself. So it may be a matter of the enlightened master looking at you and assuring you that you have universal permission to initiate yourself. Okay, that's sort of how I see it. And over the years, I've been in lots of initiatory organizations, AMORC being the first one, and I'll talk a little more about that in a second. But then through AMORC, I was initiated into the traditional Marchionist order, and went through not only the correspondence course initiations, but temple initiations, and little heptad there in Los Angeles at the time. Then there's BOTA, which was completely a correspondence self-initiation thing for me anyway. And OTO, various Golden Dawn initiatory societies, the AA, Freemasonry. I've done a lot of getting initiated. And for me at least, every one of them were fabulous initiations, and every one of them were self-initiations. Now, the Rosicrucian Order Amorc did, I think, if they believed their own press, they succeeded in doing what they do. By that I mean, Amorc started out as a very nice sort of mild metaphysical teachings that were taught in monograph form. And this is just sort of basic what we now think of as New Age stuff, okay? But in 1918 or whenever, Harvey Lewis started doing this stuff, it was pretty wild stuff. And Aleister Crowley wanted to get in on Harvey Lewis's act there for a while. But be that as it may, what was neat about the correspondence course was periodically there would be a ritual of self-initiation that you received in the monographs, sort of to open you up to a new level of teachings. Wonderful idea. Now, for me, as a very young, I was probably 3 or 4, or 2 or 3. I sort of still had the spooky idea that there was this group of adepts there up in San Jose communicating with each other telepathically and visiting me in my home temple, guiding my steps toward the light, I believe that sort of a little bit, and it was good that I did. And these rituals of self-initiation were artfully composed, and they sort of had an Egyptian-esque feel to it. And you got up and you stood up and did a few things and took little oaths to yourself but there was an unmistakable feeling that what you were doing was in connection and connected to a body of adepts. And when you're doing this in your little home, in front of your own little telesterion and in your own little altar with your little Rosicrucian Order candles and the little Rosicrucian Order altar cloth and burning your little Rosicrucian incense, there really was this feeling that you were attuned to something greater, attuned to the Great White Brotherhood, which at the time I didn't know whether that had a name to what it was. But because I made that link, I was in connection to that force. And it really didn't matter if there was just a couple of people in an office up there sorting through the mail and taking people's, monthly checks and with mimeograph machines, telephones ringing and businessy kind of stuff and office politics and stuff. It didn't matter. I was being initiated by the Great White Brotherhood. I was being initiated into the Rosicrucians. Now later, when I started to do temple work with my local Rosicrucian Order Amorc Lodge in Long Beach, I got to take these initiations in person with lodge officers and everything else. And that was cool. That was cool too. But it didn't feel as real as the version of it that I'd already given myself. Later on, friends and me, or friends and I, drove up to San Jose, and we took our 3rd degree initiation ceremony at the Grand Temple in San Jose at Rosicrucian Park, which is an awesome, just awesome Egyptian temple. It truly is awesome, jaw-dropping awesome. But it felt even less magical, even less mystical, even less plugged in than the one I received in the little temple in Long Beach, and way different than the shotgun charge I got out of the ones I did myself. So when I hear people that said, well, I joined these people, I joined this or that organization, and I took an initiation, but the lodge officers turned out to be human beings. They turned out to be, they hit on me, or they, they were assholes or something. It's not them that's initiating you guys, okay? All initiation is self-initiation. And when you're being initiated, you must put your trust in yourself, because it's self-initiation. You have to make it real. And you have to make it real no matter if your lodge officers are assholes or your lodge officers are sweet, honest people with integrity. It's still you that's initiating you. 50 years ago, we're talking 50 years ago, before your great-grandmother was born. 50 years ago, I became the embarrassingly enthusiastic student of a modern mystery school that altruistically threw wide its golden doors of wisdom to promising seekers such as myself, who could afford the price of a perpetual correspondence course. Although I had never exhibited any natural psychic ability, I was determined to become a first-rate visionary. So I dutifully practiced all the mystical exercises outlined for the new student. Now there's all sorts of little psychic kind of exercises that may seem kind of corny and kind of super lightweight to those of us today. But back in 1918 or 1915 or whenever it was these monographs were first written and distributed, it was wild, crazy stuff, People didn't even know about bacteria. Well, maybe a little bit by then, but it was wild stuff. So we may kind of poke fun at it. Oh boy, that's lightweight blue hairs trying to get a... Well, anyway. By tapping the limitless powers of my mind, I induced a drop of olive oil floating on the surface of a bowl of water to swirl with agonizing sloth in a direction it might not have otherwise swirled on its own. That was one of the experiments. I bought a pitch pipe and chanted mystic vowel sounds. I still do that to this day. It's part of the curriculum of the OHO, our Holy Order Chicken Kabbalah initiations. But I digress. I held my breath and visualized parts of my body I'd forgotten I possessed. And I stared at a candle flame until my eyes watered so much I saw everything they'd told me I would see and much more. Every other month or so, the adepts at Mystery School headquarters mailed me an examination which ruthlessly tested my proficiency in opening envelopes. Satisfied that my dues were competently paid and my address had not changed, the hidden masters then sent me a special monograph outlining the procedure for a ritual of self-initiation. Setting aside an evening when I'd not be disturbed by objective reality, I set up the ceremonial accoutrements upon the altar of my upright grand piano. God, I wish I had that piano again. It was an old Platt piano. I put tacks on the hammers, and I'd come home after a night of playing in a club, come home around 2:30, and I'd practice the piano in the middle of the night when Constance and Jean-Paul were trying to sleep. I'm a very thoughtful husband. I lit the candles and the appropriate incense purchased from Mystery School headquarters, own supply catalog, and I proceeded with the one-man initiation. I took these ceremonies very seriously and delighted in executing them with as much art and precision as I was capable of mustering. As irreverent as I may sound today, writing a half a century later, I must admit that these initiations had a profound effect upon my life. Each simple ritual touched something very deep inside me and never failed to leave me with the unambiguous feeling that I had taken the next step towards spiritual enlightenment. Eventually, I became active in a nearby lodge, and for the next few years found myself serving on the ritual team for the weekly convocations and as an officer in temple initiations. I don't believe I'm violating my oaths too seriously when I share with you the fact that the style of the initiation ceremonies, indeed the whole constitution of this particular order, you know I'm talking about Amorc here, was decidedly Egyptian. The walls of the local lodge were festooned with winged solar discs, images of Egyptian gods and hieroglyphs. The threshold of the temple room was skillfully painted to appear like the massive stones of an initiatory pyramid. At Grand Lodge headquarters, several of the administrative buildings were faithful reproductions of portions of the great temple complex at Karnak, and obelisks, pyramids, and sphinxes adorned the grounds. On several occasions, I made pilgrimages to headquarters to take temple initiations in the beautiful and spacious Grand Lodge temple. I fell strongly under the spell of all things Egyptian. Living in Southern California, with its warm, dry climate, palm-lined streets, lilies of the Nile, and pampas grass, it's very easy to daydream a shirtless, shoeless life of an Egyptian artisan or scribe or priest. I mused that perhaps in a previous incarnation I lived along the Nile or served the gods in some great temple complex. Perhaps My mummy still lies undisturbed in some undiscovered necropolis, or has been pulverized by 19th century European colonialists and sold as a miracle laxative. I wish I was exaggerating there, but they did that. Okay. However, when it came right down to seriously studying Egyptology, I soon discovered the limits of my dedication, not to mention my attention span. I half-heartedly tried to penetrate Budge's Osiris and his fragmented translation of the Egyptian Book of the Dead, but only succeeded in putting myself to sleep. This was too much work, and I finally concluded that the ancient priests encouraged a dying person to memorize the Book of the Dead in order to expedite the inevitable by boring them to death. Embarrassed by my failure to become a legitimate Egyptian adept, I secretly resigned myself to be a mystic poser and simply loiter at the threshold of the initiatory pyramid. Here, where the great light of Egypt shattered as it passed through my dilettante's prism, I imagined myself safe from its direct, scintillating ray. Here, I hoped I'd be allowed to gambol pretentiously upon the colorful but shallow steps of the outer temple. It seemed I underestimated the spiritual momentum of the magic of Egypt. It's unimaginably strong. Its foundations are hewn deep and wide in the collective consciousness of humanity, silently and secretly supporting a countless host of institutions and philosophies not traditionally associated with the land of the Nile. Egyptian magic, I would discover, is extremely subtle and very, very patient. That's my little comment on that. As far as the self-initiation thing goes, if you are lucky enough to be in a place where there is an organized group of hopefully sane individuals who are offering initiatory experiences, such as that found in the Golden Dawn, or the modern incarnations of the Golden Dawn, because remember, a lot has changed in human consciousness since 1888. Look into it. The people that run it will be flawed individuals. Maybe even almost as flawed as you are. It doesn't matter. You make the connection. It's a self-initiation. When I first took my entered apprentice degree in the Freemasons, I'd been studying the mystical stuff for well over 25 years before I joined the Masons. And the initiatory ceremonies of the Masons just absolutely blew me away. But I tell you for sure, if I would have done that 25 years earlier, before I had any of the foundation in Western mysteries, occultism, Kabbalah, Hermeticism, I would have gone, what the hell's going on? And I would have tried to get guidance from these expertly trained, but mostly as far as the esoteric end of things, mostly clueless individuals who were actually doing the initiation ceremony. I would have said, yeah, I'm not getting anything out of this. No. If that's going to be your focus, you're not going to get anything out of it. You're only going to get, this sounds like a cliche, and I'm almost embarrassed to say it like this, you're only going to get out of it what you bring to it. And when I joined the Masons, those 75-year-old, 85-year-old officers with their meticulously memorized parts were freaking angels. They were initiatory officers. They may have well been holographic images of Thoth himself, Anubis at the gate. But it was because I brought that with me myself. The same with you. Don't look for perfection in your initiatory officers. Don't look for perfections in the organizations you join. That's why I say, if you're going to do this stuff to gain enlightenment, if you're bound and determined to gain enlightenment, it doesn't matter if you're initiatory officers or adepts, saints, or fools or charlatans. You make it what it is. There, let me get off my soapbox now. Good self-initiation ceremonies that take you through the fundamentals of Kabbalistic cosmology can be found in the Chicken Kabbalah. Now, those ceremonies are actually performed in places from time to time ever since I wrote that book. But the real initiation will take place when you do it to yourself. So, that being said, tomorrow for Saturday morning cartoons, I'm going to be animated. Until then, continue to be good to yourself, be good to each other. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Love is the law, love under will.